Oral questions by members.
Member for Peace River North.
Honourable Speaker, it is hard to believe that this government has decided to make it harder for those with disabilities make it through this pandemic. The coalition 300 to Live is hosting a rally, in fact, this week to protest this government's cuts. And this is what they have to say, and I quote, "The recent slashing of the supplement has not gone unnoticed. The possibility of the supplement being cut altogether is devastating," end quote. Will the Premier stand up today and end this clawback?
Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to answer a question about this in this chamber. I'm not used to the opposition taking an interest in issues of poverty or social concerns, so it's a true pleasure to have this. And I think if this is a signal of a newfound interest in the lives of people who live in poverty, I welcome it, and I would like to encourage more interest in this as we go forward. The member well knows that in March of 2020, as we entered into this difficult phase into the COVID-19 pandemic, the government responded quickly and nimbly by providing assistance to people on income and disability assistance, as well as seniors on low income. And so I'm really pleased to say that we were able to provide that support throughout, for 9 months, in fact. And in fact, when we introduced the COVID recovery benefit, we made that applicable to everybody in British Columbia making under $125,000 a year. So I would say to the member opposite that we continue to work to ensure that our Together BC poverty reduction strategy is on target. I think we have, unlike the previous government that rejected repeated efforts on the part of the opposition at that time to institute a poverty reduction strategy, we did institute a poverty reduction strategy, something they failed to do. And so I would just say to the member opposite that we will continue to speak for people who live in poverty. We will continue to work to ensure that everyone comes through this pandemic more resilient and more able to meet the challenges of the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Peace River North on supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I'd like to do is encourage this government to take accountability for the cuts that they've made to disabilities recently. This minister should be actually paying attention to the voices of the people on disabilities, disability assistance, and low-income seniors, instead of trying to dodge the accountability that we're seeing right now. He is the one who is cutting this supplement to families. He is the one, sorry, the minister is the one, Mr. Speaker, is the one who's cutting for low-income seniors. Shameful. You can't spin this any other way, Mr. Speaker. 11,284 British Columbians have signed a petition
Members,
for the Premier,
let's hear the question, please.
For the Premier to end this clawback. People on disability assistance and low-income seniors are worried and they're angry. In 2 weeks, the supplement is going to be eliminated. Will the Premier, will the Minister stand up today and reinstate the cut?
Minister of Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the question, and I think, I would like to think that the member is actually very concerned, and I think that he raises an interesting question, and I would suggest that he, like everybody else, respect the fact that we have a budget coming out soon, and people will realize that. I would just say that in 2005, the social assistance rates under the previous government, they went up about $100 in about 12 years. And so our immediate response when succeeding the previous government.
Members, we heard the question. Let's hear the answer, please. We are wasting our time.
Mr. Speaker, I
Minister,
must say,
continue.
it's, you know, as much as I enjoy the Zoom hybrid model, being in this House and being able to actually see members across the way, it is actually heartening. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to answer the member. I would tell him that the first thing we did when we were elected in 2017 was increase the rates by $100. Then we further increased them by $50. And so I would suggest to the member opposite that our government is well on track with a number of initiatives that we've taken to reduce poverty, from childcare subsidies to building homes, doing all sorts of things that have actually helped us achieve the poverty reduction strategy goals. I think we're going to continue to do that, and I'm proud to be able to say that our government takes these issues seriously, unlike the previous government.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pharmacists are an integral part of the vaccine rollout in provinces across Canada. Oh, wait. Except here in BC, where 1,400 community pharmacies have been left out of the plan for vaccination distribution. Can the Premier explain why BC is not using pharmacies?
Minister of Health.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and the member will know that in our most recent influenza vaccination campaign, more so than ever before, more than 1 million immunizations for flu during a pandemic were done by pharmacists across BC. We are proud every day to work with pharmacists. And in our vaccine rollout plans over the coming months, pharmacists will play a critical role here as well, significantly in dose 2, but now that we have access to fridge-stable vaccines such as AstraZeneca, and we hope at some point in the future Johnson & Johnson, they'll continue to play a role. And we're, the Minute member would expect, in discussions with pharmacists now as to how we can use the extraordinary resource and talent of community pharmacists to support our efforts. So the member is incorrect. We'll be working with pharmacists strongly here in our campaign to ensure that we deliver vaccines to everyone. I also want to note that as of today, a majority of people over 90 have received the COVID-19 vaccine in BC. A significant share of people between 85 and 89 have already received the vaccine. And this is because, Honourable Speaker, of the extraordinary and dedicated work of healthcare professionals and healthcare workers across BC and the desire of people across BC to be immunized. And I am enthusiastic about this effort, enthusiastic to see the faces of people individually and the impact of vaccines on them, and extremely proud of the work all of our public health officials are doing.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Kelowna Mission on supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 682,000. That's how many different vaccine doses are coming to BC within weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. That's how long it will take the pharmacists to prepare. Using pharmacies to distribute the vaccine has been efficient and responsive in other provinces. Pharmacies could vaccinate 460,000 British Columbians per week. But this government hasn't started getting ready. Government should have engaged them months ago and needs to do so now. To the Premier, why are pharmacies still not engaged?
Minister of Health.
Well, the member knows, and I think everybody in BC knows, that the principal thing standing in the way of immunizing BC, there will be, of course, and is an extraordinary effort to do that by people across the healthcare system, people in community, people everywhere. All of that is happening. The main limitation is the vaccine we receive. In BC, we are receiving vaccine and we are delivering it in people's arms with remarkable efficiency and based on the values of British Columbians, which is to give protection to those who are most vulnerable first and to stop the spread of COVID-19. That is what we've been doing. Pharmacists will be playing an important role as we go through our immunization plan in BC. We have to, after all, immunize up to 4.3 million eligible British Columbians with dose 1, and then again 4.3 million with dose 2. I can assure the member that pharmacists will play a critical role in this rollout, and we will continue to do the work that British Columbians expect to deliver this necessary vaccine in this extraordinary pandemic with compassion, with values, and with efficiency.
Leader of Third Party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. In the last few days, my colleague and I have repeatedly asked the Minister of Forests about when she will fulfil her promise to implement the recommendations of the Old Growth Panel and provide immediate protections to the most endangered old growth left in our province. The responses have been recycled talking points and lumping in stubby subalpine trees in her numbers when she knows that what we're asking about, what the Old Growth Panel is referring to, what British Columbians think of as old growth, are the ancient temperate forests with big trees. It's not a game, it's not theater. It's about whether this government takes seriously its responsibility to protect these astonishingly rare and disappearing forests. Today, my question is to the Premier. During the election campaign, he committed to implementing all of the recommendations of the Old Growth Review Panel, beginning with immediate deferrals to stop the bleed as they work on a broader shift. Will the Premier today acknowledge that his government has not yet implemented the panel's recommendation to provide immediate interim protections for our highest risk ancient forests? And will he direct his minister to urgently fulfill this commitment?
Minister of Forest, Land, Natural Resource Operations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And we know that BC's forests are a big part of what makes our province so unique and special. Our government knows that old growth trees are an integral part of healthy ecosystems, and we take that very seriously. For many years, the old government took an unbalanced and unsustainable approach to managing our old growth forests, and we are making different choices. Our government is bringing in a fundamental shift in forestry to protect and preserve old growth trees for today and for years to come. And we will do this while supporting forest workers and forest-dependent communities. We received advice and clear recommendations from the independent panel on how we can do this, and we are dedicated to implementing all 14 of the recommendations, and this work has already started. And as a first step, we worked with First Nations to protect old growth forests in 9 areas considered high-risk ecosystems across BC, just as the report asked us to do. There is much more work to do, and we will do it.
Leader of Third Party and Supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and it is disappointing to hear the Minister refer to the old government when this is indeed their second term of government, and many choices have been made in the last 4 years. It's clear you can't change a paradigm overnight, but right now the opposite is happening, Honourable Speaker. Deferrals don't mean permanent protection. They're a tool to maintain options in a time of crisis. Talk and maintain options rather than talk and log. The big tree old growth that was logged last week won't be available for consultation and informed decision-making, nor will the big tree old growth that is logged this week or next week. The Old Growth Panel recommendations are embedded in a 3-year framework with 6-month steps, starting with immediate action for at-risk forests. We have missed the first deadline, Honourable Speaker, and to date, the BC government has not tied its implementation promise to a work plan with milestone dates. Without such a step, the BC government remains unaccountable for meeting future deadlines. My question again is to the Premier. Will he direct his minister to release a public work plan with milestone dates for implementation so that the public can have faith and take him at his word?
Minister of Forests, Lands and Natural Resource Operations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's really disappointing to hear the member mischaracterize the independent panel's report. There is no deadlines. The independent panel was clear. Making a paradigm shift in how we manage old forests will take time and collaboration with all partners. And I'll note for members that Gary Merkel, one of the report's authors, recently said he doesn't question our government's commitment to implementing his recommendations, and he knows the process will take years. And we have protected old growth trees across BC, over 900 hectares in Crystalline Creek. And this area has an intact watershed with wetland and old and mature forests, and over 1,800 hectares in McKelvey Creek, and old growth temperate rainforest and watersheds home to wildlife and salmon habitat, and over 2,700 hectares in Seven Sisters. And this ecosystem has many different types of trees and wildlife. And we have deferred logging as part of our caribou conservation work, protection for spotted owls, and in protecting the marble murrelet and northern goshawk recovery plans. We have done work, we have done much, and we will keep working hard to protect BC's iconic old growth forests.
Member for Kelowna West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise today. In my riding, we're lucky to have a team in the Western Hockey League and the BC Hockey League. Tyson and Damon Jugnauth, Riley Sharoon, are excited about getting back to play for the West Side Warriors. Dr. Henry has done her job, working with the leagues so that they can return to play in a safe way. But the Premier has not done his job. He's sitting on hundreds of millions of approved relief dollars. The fiscal year end is just 2 weeks away, and the 5 WHL teams and the 17 BCHL teams continue to wait. 2 weeks ago, we asked the Premier if the $9.5 million asked for in support was coming, and he said, quote, "We need to make sure that we put our shoulder to the wheel, provide the resources, and to keep these organizations going until they can get back on their feet," end quote. So a simple question to the Premier, where's the money?
Minister of Job, Economic Recovery and Innovation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. Not many members in this House will appreciate the value of sport as much as I do. I credit the opportunity to participate in sport for one of the reasons why I'm here in the Legislature today. And it's great news to hear that there's progress being made, and these athletes, these young athletes, are going to be able to participate and pursue their careers as they've always dreamt of it. I'll let the member know that there are grants available for sports teams to apply. In fact, some teams have applied and been approved already for money. So I would work happily with the member to get in touch with the team that he refers to and help them navigate the system so that they can also apply for those dollars.
Member for Richmond North Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is really heartbreaking to learn that tourism-related businesses are paying the price for the Premier's bungling of economic recovery. When asked about funding for the Richmond night market, the Premier was simply dismissive of the question. When asked about the need for sites like Butcher Gardens to have support, the Premier said his wife likes to visit. Well, it's been 2 weeks and the clock is ticking. The fiscal year end is coming up fast. My question is to the Premier. The Premier had a year to come up with a plan to help groups like the Richmond Night Market and Butcher Gardens. So where's the promised money?
Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. Of course, we miss all of those activities to be going to in our backyard. We miss going to Science World, Bouchard Gardens, the festivals and the night markets that the member speaks of. And every week we're making progress with the rollout of the vaccine. Every week we're making progress seeing that our communities are getting safer, and that advocacy that the sector has impressed upon our government about having access to grants, tourism-specific grants, is on the table. I encourage the member to be encouraging the businesses in her backyard and all of the members in these chambers to be accessing the $45,000 grant that was a call to action from the task force, the tourism task force that our government appointed, asking them for direct advice on what our government should do. And what they called on us to do was to deliver on $45,000 non-refundable loans, their grants, and they're available to communities. So thank you very much to the member opposite for the question.
Member for Caribou-Chilcotin.
Sadly, Mr. Speaker, many of the groups that we speak of today are falling simply between the cracks. Perhaps you've heard this saying, all hat and no cows. Well, today, Mr. Speaker, we're saying all hat and no money, which sums up the Premier's handling of support for groups like the Williams Lake Stampede, the Interior Pacific Exhibition, festivals on Vancouver Island and throughout the province. 2 weeks ago, the Premier stood in this House and talked while the Cloverdale Rodeo announced their postponement. 2 weeks later, these groups are still waiting for answers. This government is sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars that were approved 12 months ago. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier actually deliver this money to these groups so that they can continue to support their communities?
Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Speaker. And again, thanks to the member for the question. I believe he raised this question last week. I did at that time offer the member to reach out to us so that we can work together to find a solution. And that offer is still there to the member. So maybe I'll get my staff to proactively reach out to his office to work together to find a solution.
Member for Vancouver-Langara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been actually 2 weeks that we've been having this conversation across the aisle and pressing the government for this kind of support. 2 weeks ago, the Premier was full of good humour. Support is coming, he promised. And since then, silence. The PNE needs support, especially the small vendors who are hurting. The Vancouver Art Gallery has seen revenue fall by 75%. Science World's revenue has dropped by 85%. The Vancouver Aquarium has closed its doors and is struggling to find the money to feed its animals. And there are so many more organizations like these all around our province, including Exploration Place in Prince George, that need this government to step up and provide support. Mr. Speaker, the Premier has had a year to come up with a plan to help organizations like these that provide important educational and cultural spaces and programs for BC. So, where's the money?
Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And certainly we know there's a lot of businesses struggling, and certainly we know that a lot of nonprofits are struggling as well. I think the public understands without international tourism, without the ability for people to travel and visit these sites, that it's going to be a difficult time. As the Minister for Tourism and Arts Culture mentioned, we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to see vaccination. With that comes hope that we'll be able to again visit those iconic places. I am a member.
Members, let's hear the answer. Continue, Minister.
I'm a member of Science World. I appreciate the good work the Science World does. That's why I continue to support them. The member mentioned many organizations that are struggling with ensuring animals are being fed. I want to assure the member that we also, in Stronger BC, had $4.2 million to help organizations to ensure that they had the money to continue to feed their animals. I can happily share that list with the member after question period if he likes.
Member for Caribou North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Arts groups and artists are feeling this Premier's hollow words and incompetence firsthand. And to be clear, these groups have reached out to the government. While the member may say that there is light at the end of the tunnel, for us raising these questions, the question is, will the lights be permanently out? Assistance is required immediately. Donna Spencer of the Professional Performing Arts Venue and Independent Cinemas Group has been waiting for a plan from the Premier. She says, and I quote, "These businesses that live in communities are not being mentioned. sitting dark when they could be providing economic stimulus as well as emotional health, end quote. While the Premier has waited a year to come up with assistance for venues like the Rio Theatre, he should really read their marquee, which says, and I quote, "I can't believe we're a sports bar," end quote. Through you, Mr. Speaker, can the Premier tell us when is the money coming?
Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. There are theatres across BC that have applied for the grants and received money. Just recently, I got a message from a theatre in Trail, BC, which was a thank you note because they had received it and they were sharing what that meant for them as a theatre and the important work that they do to keep their community united and how they build community. And so I would say to the members, if you have businesses that are struggling, that perhaps could use access to the $45,000 non-repayable grant, certainly reach out to us. The information is available. There's actually a webinar online as well, very short. It shows a very simple process for applications. Also, the Minister of Tourism and Arts and Culture has recently announced infrastructure dollars for theatres, for other tourism and arts-related facilities that want to upgrade their facilities so that they can welcome more tourists and have more opportunities when they do reopen, which we all hope is going to be very soon, and that money is available for these organizations to access as well.
The Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the answers today simply have not cut it. 2 weeks ago, when we raised these questions in the House, the Premier was very clear. Good news was on its way. In December, when we were raising these types of issues, they were working on it. The Tourism Minister said they were working on it. They're having good discussions. That was in December. We're getting the exact same answer today at the end of March as we approach the fiscal year end. It does make one wonder if the Premier is just trying to find an avenue to have photo ops of good news, of giving out money at year end, instead of actually providing the funds in a timely fashion to the organizations that he knows full well he's intending on supplying dollars to. His own answer 2 weeks ago was that the money was on the way. Good news was coming 2 weeks ago. That's 2 more weeks that all the employees in these groups and businesses have been waiting, wondering if they're going to have a job on April 1st. 2 more weeks they've had to wait, not knowing what the future holds for their organization. And today, asking questions on behalf of those same organizations that don't qualify for the $30,000 or the $45,000, we're getting the same answers back from this minister. So again, when will the Premier announce the year-end spending that we all know is going to be coming and let these groups have a little bit of certainty, and more importantly, the employees that work for them know that they actually have a job that will continue on?
Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thanks to the member for his question. And I think we should be proud here in British Columbia. We have the highest per capita supports for businesses and people in all of Canada, by a long stretch. We should be extremely proud here in Canada that we've had a very steady hand on the health side from both Dr. Henry and Minister Dix, because we've collectively, with the work of people across BC, avoided that second lockdown, which I know has been crippling for our provinces across Canada. We see that reflected. We know over 70% of businesses here in BC are relying right now on government supports to continue to operate. And so we're proud of the supports we're putting in place. That's why we're at 99.4% of jobs returned to BC. We should be proud of that. It's a collective effort. Everybody's involved. We should all be proud of that. So Speaker, we're not out of the pandemic yet. We're still in it. It's going to be a challenging few months, we know, but we have hope. We have light at the end of the tunnel, which is getting brighter and brighter. That vaccines are continuing to be rolled out. And I would say to the member across the way, he should be hopeful. We've done a good job collectively in this House, and we're going to continue to support businesses and people for as long as they need to get out of this pandemic.
House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, March 23rd, this House met last year and unanimously approved $5 billion to help support businesses and people in British Columbia. $1.5 billion of that was held back and announced only a week or so before an election was called by the Premier as part of the election platform. Then in December, this House meets, approves another $2 billion, to which the Finance Minister last week could only account for $1 billion of that in one of her answers. So forgive this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, if we're a little bit unsure of where the government is spending all the money, let alone accounting for it, and how much is actually available for year-end. So when we hear the Premier say 2 weeks ago that good news is coming and that the year-end money that's left over from unspent programs will go to help these agencies and organizations that don't qualify for any of the bungled programs this minister has brought forward to date, I guess it's silly of the citizens of British Columbia to take the Premier at his word, because he breaks it time and time and time again when it comes to things like this. So again, when will we hear the announcements of whether or not all these organizations that desperately need the funds to survive are going to see the money or not? Give an honest answer as to whether or not they will actually see funds or not.
Minister of Jobs and Economic Recovery.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And as I mentioned earlier to the question to the member, we have provided the highest per capita supports for people and businesses in Canada, the highest. And the member mentions the amount of dollars that we collectively approved. $25 million for job creation projects throughout BC. That's gone out. Forest employment program, money's gone out. Invasive species work, money's gone out. Dollars for digital marketing for small businesses, money's gone out. Agri-tech dollars, money's gone out. Honourable Speaker, the list is huge. The list is huge of the amount of supports. And this is not even mentioning all the other pieces that we've put in place. Tax credits for businesses for hiring and rehiring employees, commercial property tax, and that's not even mentioning. There was a recent report that came out, Honourable Speaker, from the CFIB that highlights that majority of the businesses in BC are relying on government right now. And we're proud of that support, and we're going to continue to provide that support until we get out of this pandemic.
The bell ends the question period.